Welcome to Artist Alchemy. I am John Cruz, and as you can probably tell, I am flying solo today. So unfortunately, my co-host Steph is laid up with a nasty cold and was unable to make it today. But I'm happy to have Steve Cooper on to chat with. So Steve is a stand-up comedian, a podcast host, a networking extraordinaire. I want to get into a lot of those things. He has two podcasts: Cooper Talks, which is a interview show, and the Coop Tank, which is more of a roundtable show, which is local business leaders. So, Steve, thanks for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be a guest instead of a host. It's always a.
I know, like, yeah, well, yeah, the roles are very reversed in this situation because you've done this like hundreds of times, and I think this is our like 14th or 13th show, something like that.
At least you're doing it. That's the thing. Like with podcasting, so many people do it and then they stop. Like during the pandemic, people are like, "Oh, we got a podcast." They do like 5 or 6, and they find out you're not going to make money, and then they sit there and they don't get good guests. They don't understand why they can't get good guests, and it's like, well, you've only done it 5 or 6 times, so you're not going to get good guests, but you're sticking with it. And that's the thing. It's a labor of love. It's like any kind of art form. It's a labor of love, and podcasting. I've gone through. I mean, I was in a slump. This week, I was supposed to have 5 interviews, and for Cooper Talk, and I had 2 because the one she forgot about it. The other guy sent me a message going, "Steve, I just found out." He's an actor, Michael Boatman, who was in Spin City and Arliss. He's like, "I just found out I'm not supposed to be doing interviews during the strike." And then the other was this old legendary folk singer named Jesse Colin Young, and his PR people switched him on me from 2:30 to 1, and I sent the Zoom, but I never changed it on my calendar, so I never showed up for the interview.
Oh, so you missed it.
Yeah, and that's never happened. So yeah, so that's the thing. It's not easy. You get frustrated, but you guys are doing a great job. And she's sick. I would have powered through, but hey, that's all right.
Yeah, she was like, "I am so sorry, but I don't think that there's any way I can talk." I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, we'll figure it out. And she and I, when we first like started chatting about this, like the whole idea was like, we're creative people. She's a fantasy photographer. I do portrait here, and we're like, anytime you're doing anything creative, it's going to be shitty when you start. And if you don't just keep doing it, like you're never going to improve. So there's no reason to wait until things are perfect. It's like just make the thing and put it out into the world and then improve as you go.
Exactly. And you just have to do it. That's the whole thing with creativity. You just have to do it. I had a sketch troupe that ran in Hollywood for a year, and I kept wanting the idea of having a sketch troupe. I want to do this. I want to do this. And I was waiting tables at Planet Hollywood in Beverly Hills, and another waiter, Don Cesario, owned a theater called the Elephant Off Main, which is based on a Mamet play. He was a real theater guy. And I did a play I wrote one night in this place. Then I said, "You have that little room. What will it cost me?" And he told me, and I said, "Okay, let's do it." And I gave myself a month and a half. I had no show written, no actors written. I mean, cast. So I went in and I did it. I sat down, I wrote, I got some guys who said they wanted to do it. Some people flaked. I said, Hollywood, everyone wants to do it. I'm like, guys, it will cost you like $100 a month to have this once a week where you can invite casting directors. And we're doing a show. It's not like you're just walking into their office. And people are like, "Oh, I'll do it. And you know how it is. As you said, people, it's going to suck at first. They don't know what to do. And I was very controlled because I said, I'm going to direct it. I'm going to write it. And I ended up getting one guy I knew, my neighbor in San Diego, who then moved up to LA when I was up there. And he was an ex-sergeant in the Marines who was a English as a second language teacher, but was a master with dialects. He was great. He could nail like every. And I said, "You want to do it?" And he wrote a novel. I knew he was creative, and he's like, "Yeah," and he was great. Then I had one guy who was like this real actor type, and he had this attitude. I'm like, "Dude, you're not delivering." And then we had this stoner who we didn't know if he was going to show up or not. But it was one of those things. In the beginning, it's a rocky road, but like you guys did, and like when I did with the Coop Tank and Cooper Talk, you just have to do it, because the worst thing is if you do it and it sucks, you know what? At least you did it, and you can delete that crap because people aren't watching it. They're not going to go, "Oh, I want to find John Cruz. I got photos from him. I want to sit there and find a podcast he did 2 years ago." They're not going to do that. So,
right. So when you go on like so you have a very diverse like career as far as your creativity. So, like, did you get your start in stand up, or did you get it in like more of the sketch comedy? Like, where did you start out? Like that process?
I got my okay. In high school, I was never a class clown, but I always made people laugh. I was more of like the writer. I never wanted a spotlight just because I didn't like most of the class clowns are jerks. I think most of them were like, they really needed the attention.
Yeah,
And I had always, when I got to college, I said, I was majoring in business, and I said, I would love to do, I want to do comedy. I want to perform to friends of mine. And my first time like on stage like that it was at Stockton State College, now Richard Stockton University, and they had a contest called Mr. Stockton, and they did it as like Miss America for guys, like a talent and
hmm,
dressed and body and my friend said do it as a joke. The senior, this guy named Ziggy, he goes, Coop, you got to do it. We were drunk, like, oh, I'm gonna do it. So I signed up. So I still remember I was a hit. I came in second. I made the news. I made the paper because when they did the body contest, like dudes were walking out. One guy came out with a speedo. He's all oiled up, and one
yeah,
guy's ripped. I'm coming out with my hairy body with bright orange shorts, and I oiled myself up when I'm flexing. And then these guys are coming out for formal wear and tuxes, and I got like we went to a thrift shop. We got the most ugly like Rodney Dangerfield regular guy stuff, and they asked a question. I joked, and as my talent one guy who sang and played guitar, one guy did magic. I did a Rick Springfield air guitar for Jesse's Girl. And my buddy gave me a guitar and he wrote Springfield on the back. I had guitar picks that said I signed Steve Cooper, threw them to the audience, and I blew the roof off the place. Crowd was going crazy. And that's when I got the performing bug because it was like, wow. And then I was a freshman and like junior and senior girls are hitting on me. They're like, oh, you're so funny. Like the president of the fraternity, I ended up hooking up with his girlfriend because she's like, oh,
oh
my,
wow,
because they said it was fixed. They said, no, the show was fixed because we wanted a fraternity, you got to win. And then so I was like, I want to perform. So when I got out of college, I told my parents I'd like to do stand up. But I have a degree and I was selling fax machines. And
hmm,
my mom saw an ad for an old place called the Learning Annex. It was a they would have classes for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks for like $45. And it was in Center City. And I was, growing up in Cherry Hill, I really didn't go to the city much. I would take the speed line in, and it was how to get into stand-up comedy. And there it shaped how you don't know what to do. Like I have no idea what the comedy is really. I mean, I listened to albums, so I went to this class, and it made me write an act, and it made us get on stage for an open mic, and then that's when my career started as a comedian. And I went to the Comedy Factory Outlet my first night, had a great set. Everyone has a great set on the first night, and
hmm.
you get that in your mind that, oh, I'm better than everybody.
It's all like,
I don't need to. Oh wait, I should be headlining next week. You don't know that like these guys have been working for years to craft an act, and how your 5 minutes doesn't translate to 45 minutes. And I was so cocky, and I was walking down. I had my little black blazer, my wife beater T-shirt on. I was like, and I went up next time and I ate it, and I didn't come back for a month. And then I remember I said I got to get back, and I went to the Comedy Factory Outlet, and again, and there was a Comedy Works in Philly, and this guy George Sharp, bless his soul, he passed away 2 years ago. He was like, dude, no matter what, whatever, because they would pick out of the hat to see when you would go on,
mhm.
unless you were a working actor and you get slotted. He said, no matter what number you do, what number you get, always get on stage. So I would be going on stage sometimes in front of two people, but it was just something. It showed other acts that you were dedicated, that you wanted to do
Mhm.
it. And then you go to the Comedy Works, and they would rate you, like they had a rating system. And so I was new, so I went later. But a few years, like probably a year later, I started doing a character called Steve the Stud. It was before Urkel. It was before Screech, and it's sort of like my uh, TikTok character. I would go and I'd pull my pants up and I'd pull my shorts back and I'd have a bow tie and like, you psych? Hey, you psych? And from that, the guy at the Comedy Works says, wow, this guy's really trying. So I started getting good spots there. And then to Comedy Factory Outlet, where I was also starting to work as a doorman and collecting money for like $5 an hour under the table, because I knew that solidified good stage time for us. I got my first break when Dice Clay came into town, right before he blew up, right before that
Oh
TLA
wow,
show. And they said, who's going to open for Dice? And Clay Heary, the owner, said, Steve the Stud. He goes, perfect contrast. And that's when I went on, and that's when I was felt so much pressure, but I had a great set because it was packed. And I'm so the antithesis of Dice. And that's when I really started getting into it. Then it just rolled from there. It's like anything, we talk about it in networking. You meet comics, you learn how to talk to comics. They recommend you. This guy, Grover Silcox, who is one of the most brilliant comics ever from Philadelphia. He has a show up in Lehigh Valley. He's one of the local Emmys. He was on the Morning Zoo. He knew me from the Comedy Factory outlet, and he told this guy, Andy Scarpati, who at the time had, I think, 7 or 8 clubs. He wanted me to open for him in State College. So I drove out to State College with him. He was married, so he didn't want to stay the night. We had rooms. I'm a young comic. I'm like, yeah, I want to go meet chicks.
Right.
He drove back, and he was like me. And I called Andy the next week, and Andy said, Grover loved you. And he said, what do you have open on your calendar? And I had a few weekends booked. I had 35 weekends open, and he filled every one as an MC. And that really got me to roll, because that meant I had every weekend I was going, and this is when comedy was big. This was probably 88.
Yeah.
In places all over, King of Prussia, Northeast Philly, Cherry Hill, Mount Laurel. And I knew every weekend I was going, and I was going to do 3 sold out shows. And as an MC, as a host, you do 15 up front and you do 5 in the middle. And it made me, I was lucky. I leaped and bounded other comics, because I was getting, and plus I was going to the open mics Wednesday and Thursday. And if there was another open mic or a one nighter, and back then you could, it was good. There was a lot of stage time. So that was my path as a comic. And then it's like anything, you move up. And then I got to headlining like C clubs, like crappy clubs in like Painesville, Ohio, and Townsend, Maryland. But then I ended up getting out of business. I was in a marriage. I was tired of traveling. And it beats you up, the business. It beats you up.
Yeah. So when you're doing like the MC, like you were talking about, like the 15-minute in front, the 5 in the middle, you're going in front of and behind different comics. Do you adjust your set based upon the vibe of the room, or do you just say, I'll bring the room back to me for this 5 minutes and then I'll let it go? Like, how do you play with that? Because I know that the engagement with the room is like, that's one of the big things in comedy, right? It's like, how do I run the room?
Well, the one problem, and I've talked to a few comics about this who've been around. The one problem that the comedic bookers do is they put a new person on, and you're exactly right. They should not put a new person on as an MC, because you are the pulse of the room. Now, when I was new, it was one thing, and back then you go up and and then you bring on a feature middle out comic for 30 minutes, and then you bring on the headliner. Now, some headliners wouldn't want you material, but for me, I mean, you didn't see my gig with Matt Reese. When I did a gig with Matt Reese 2 years ago on Valentine's Day, I went up and I was the opener, and he had this other kid do a guest set. Well, I knew this other kid was going to eat it. And I just told Joe, and he's like, why? I said, well, one, I said, this is our crowd. And me and Joe had the same crowd, 40, 45 and up, Jewish, Italian, New Jersey, Philadelphia. You make a local reference to crowd. Oh, yeah. And I went up and had a great set. And I felt bad, because I knew this kid wasn't going to follow me. And he didn't. So I went back up and I just did a little bit of time. Now, when you work with someone like Joe, you don't worry about it, because he's such a pro and he's been doing it for so long. He gets the crowd. But when you host, or like when you host a show, if there's like 5 comics on it, you have to control the room. I mean, I used to host an open mic in Burbank, and but I know, like, I booked it. There was like 6 shows, but if someone stopped in, I let them do it. I let them get on stage. If an act sucks, you gotta get the crowd back. And that's good, because then the crowd's happy to see you. But then if you're the host, you go up and you eat crap to start, then it's awful going back on stage again, because the crowd's like, oh, here comes that guy. Oh God, we hate this guy. And that's why I think I succeeded as a host, because I was always likable on stage. I wasn't even if my material was edgy, I never came across mean. Like, I joked around one time doing a set where I was all pissed off, and even then people weren't mad at me.
Yeah.
So it's you really, the host. That's why in New York City, like the clubs back in the day, Catch a Rising Star, Comic Strip, all those, they would sit there and the best guys would host. And in Canada, the headliners pretty much host, because they'll do 10 up front, bring the feature on, they'll do 25, and then they'll bring the headliner up, even though they're doing a majority of the time.
Oh, wow. So it was funny. So I was having a conversation with somebody I know the other day, and it's like something I thought about a couple years ago when I was in the design world about like relativity of taste, right? Everybody thinks that their taste is that they have taste. And then I rank the tiers that being funny, most people think that they're funny. And then it's like intelligent, and then it's good looking, right? You have more people to tell you that they're ugly than they're not funny. When you're in that space, like you're doing it professionally, like people can make, yeah, they have their friend circles, they can make them laugh at like the dinner table, but like how many people have you seen like they're going to give this a shot, and like they don't understand it. It is a fundamentally different skill set to go craft a joke that plays to a room. Like did you run into that a lot in your days of like these guys coming in and just like you're not ready for this?
Well, it's funny. I run into it more now in
Yeah.
networking. People think they're funny. And I'm like, no. And I know someone who, so I want to do comedy. They did it. And I just knew this person wasn't funny, and they weren't. And, you would run into it. You would get people, like, as you said, people go, oh, you're funny. You should try it. And they would go on once, they do an open mic, and then they'd have their friends come, like me. When I went on a second time and I ate it, they wouldn't come back. Then there's some people who just aren't funny. And I never understood what, like me, I'm not a good athlete. I go to play, in a batting cage, and I'm hitting grounders. So I'm not going to go to the batting cage anymore because I suck at it. It's embarrassing to me, and it's frustrating. There was comics I knew who just, they weren't funny. And I knew this one guy, and he had it like, remember we went to a gig together, and he had like his whole apartment. He was an engineer. He was a smart guy. And his whole apartment, he had like all these note cards and shit all laid out, like all this. And I was like, how can someone, and he loved comedy. Like, how can this guy be so unfunny? And there was a lot of people like that. I knew people who, there's something called stage years. And when you go on stage, like me, my stage years is if I flub a joke, if I screw up something, or if I do a bit, I could be having a cruising for 25 minutes. But if I have to do a bit where it doesn't work, that's what sticks in my mind.
Yeah.
People who don't have stage years, they don't hear that they're not getting laughs. And I remember this one woman I was friends with. She was great. I mean, she was a very nice person, wasn't funny. And she was like, oh, well, I go, how's the crowd? Well, they didn't talk. I'm like, well, that's not the idea. The idea is to have them laugh. So there, you run into a lot of people who think they're funny, and that's like anything. I mean, people who meet me for the first time, I don't make them laugh. One, I have no need to. A lot of times people make people laugh because it's an insecurity. I had some guy come up to me at a networking event and goes, oh yeah, I heard you're a comic. I go, I used to be. And I say I used to be. I mean, I still, when I perform, you saw me, I go, I kick ass. But I only do a few months, because I don't feel like traveling.
Right.
My one friend's like, you should perform more. And I'm like, I don't feel like driving 2 hours. It's, Philly was fun. I'll make, a few hundred, take the train in, come back. And I sit there, I go, but I know that, but there's some people they, I told this guy I did comedy, and he's like, oh, I was a comic. I know, really? Yeah, really? Okay. Yeah, I went to a few open mics. That doesn't make you a comic. And this guy was a prick, so I knew it wasn't funny. But yeah, you got a lot of people who think they're funny, and they go up on stage, and it's completely different. Hanging out with your buddies, drinking a beer, or hanging out, like I can joke around with people. Once I get to know someone, I make them laugh because I know how to write comedy. But going up on stage, you can't go like, hey, look at me, I'm Joe Beer Guy. It doesn't work. Like people
Right.
who go to a comedy club are versed on what comedy is. That's why a lot of these YouTube stars don't do well on stage. They have a huge following, but they'll go on stage and follow a seasoned act.
Yeah.
But the person will go on. They're not used to going on stage, and they follow someone who's good, and they go up there and they go, "Hey, look at me!" and they do a fart noise with their own. People don't buy it. I mean, it's just, yeah. So there's a lot of people who think they're funny. More power to them. The worst is the people who think they're funny and say, "I should do comedy," and say, "Well, why don't you then?" Don't tell me you should do it. It's like if I
Yeah.
say to you, John, I should be a photographer, then you say, "Do you have a camera?" No. So it's the thing. So that's the one thing that's frustrating. And when you're a comic, people, oh, I'm funnier than you. I've had people say that to me who are on comics. I said, you never see me.
Really?
Oh yeah, people, I'm funnier than you, man. I don't know. And then I get that on Facebook. I'm funny. I write, hey, it's just, and then people on Facebook, like I write the stupid jokes, I'll write jokes. People try to tag it. It's like, no, you're not a comedy writer. Like if it's a comedy writer, if it's like a Rich Scheidner or a Wendy Liebman, like Rich will send me a message and go, "Hey, Coop, you should add this." Or I had this guy Steve Bluestein who's been around forever, added something to one of my bits, and I was like I was complimenting, But
Mhm.
I love when people add stuff. It's like you're not a comic. Don't try to be funnier than me because these jokes I do here, I don't do any material that I put on Facebook.
Right, this isn't, right, you're not getting a free preview, like, that's not how
No,
this
and
works.
I don't because I don't one, I don't remember them. And two, my writing style has changed where I don't, I used to do tons of one-liners, when I started out, but not to that like on the Hedberg or Stephen Wright where they were very slow. I was more talking, but I mean, at the very beginning, I would just sit there and tell jokes behind a mic stand. I was afraid to talk to the crowd.
Mhm.
But now I don't do that. And so I just put these jokes up that I think are funny. And I may pull one out once in a while on a show. Just if I do a stupid, my wife hates it. I do the stupid Jerry Lewis singing Jimi Hendrix bit impression. And then I will switch to go, this is stupid. Then I'll do a few stupid one-liners. But that's the only time.
Yeah. Well, so talk about like your evolution of your style, like from straight up just telling jokes and getting, like, how did you start was it just the volume of performance to say, okay, I'm starting to feel comfortable with who I am as a comic, and like what made you, because there are lanes, and like you talk about like the Mitch Hedbergs and the Stephen Wrights, like they had a very thing, and then you had like the Norm Macdonalds, and then you had the Andrew Dice, like you had these comics who had their shtick, and that was like their thing. Um, what made you decide that, like, where did you fall into where you felt comfortable in your performance style?
Well, I went when I did this Steve the Stud, that got me comfortable on stage in the character. And I wrote dumb jokes. And I'd open up with a Banaka blast. Hey, see a good looking guy. Hey, and do that. And it would get a laugh. So it made me
Mhm.
comfortable. And I just get tired of doing that bit. I just got tired of the character because I was like, it's taxing. You're always going, hey, you want to be yourself. You grow out of it.
Yeah.
You got me here. And then, I would just, you develop doing your act. Now, I mean, you start feeling comfortable on stage. So it's like a sport. When you get better, you may not be a good wide receiver. You may not be able to do a one hand catch. But I started doing I was doing I used to do 250, 300 shows a year. So you start growing into your body. But I never found myself. I never felt comfortable on stage. And I think that's the one thing. And then when I walked away from it, now when I come back, it's the only time I really feel that I'm myself. And I think that's just because one, I don't care.
I was
Because
gonna
when you're
say, yeah.
doing it as your job, you go, man, if I go and I eat it 2 out of 3 shows, which can happen, these bookers are going to rebook me, and they
Mhm.
have 3 clubs, and I'm a feature, so that's 6 weeks out of my 52. So you put that pressure on you. Now I just go up and I say, I mean, the shows I've done. When you saw me, I I think I did 20 minutes. I don't even know, but probably 10 of it was new, and I never done it. But when you talk about, when you find your style, I also now from writing jokes, I wrote jokes for a website where I have to write like 40 jokes a day, which was sit down and write these jokes. Now, my whole life, they've always just come to me.
Mhm.
I can't sit and write with someone. But when you saw me, I just knew that those bits would work. The only one that didn't work that great was the Captain Noah bit. And I went out on the edge for that. And it got a laugh, but not what I wanted. It was a setup because I just thought I got some, oh, like they felt bad for me. But
Yeah.
now I know it's going to work. And also, I know if it doesn't work, I don't care because I have enough confidence where I can get the crowd back. I did a 25-minute set a few weeks ago. I could have done 35. I couldn't know when I saw you that night you saw me. I do a whole bit about people that irritate me. I got 2 because I was doing new stuff. And when you look at a crowd, you can sense it. And when you don't care, I mean, I can I curse real quick?
Mhm. Yeah,
But
feel free.
I did a bit in front of, and it was a bunch of people when I was in Pizzeria Uno. And it was a bunch of people that we know from networking.
Mhm.
Most embarrassed me. And I did a bit, and I was like, you know what? I don't care. I did a bit about the difference of the Dunk Bozo, which is a game in Wildwood and on the boardwalks where you throw the ball and the guy yells at you, throw the baseball and try to dunk him. So I said, oh, in Ocean City, it's a lot different. So I was like, hey, are you wearing your wife's shirt? Like I was making it. But then I just said, screw it. I said, and wow, they're like, hey, cocksucker. And I said cocksucker like 5 times or 6 times, and it killed. And then I tagged it with, I said, I did this a few weeks ago, and I didn't. That was a lie. I had never done the bit before. I said, I did this a few weeks ago. And then I said, what do you call them? Gen X or bitches? What do you call them? And he came up and he said, oh, Mr. Cooper, I really liked your act, except that one thing when you used the word CS too much, and it really offended me. And I went on and I said, well, I said, listen, I appreciate it. And I will take that in consideration. And he goes, thank you. And he goes, my name is Jim. I said, thank you, Jim. And by the way, you're a cocksucker. And I didn't care. Like before, I would sit there and worry, like, I don't care anymore. But I knew that would work. And I knew people
Yeah.
wouldn't get offended. And that's like you said, feeling your crowd. There was a bunch of people from networking. I did a bit about people not knowing how to use the mute button on Zoom. And I went and I was the person and like that and make it fit. And I knew it would work. And that's when you have the confidence. And then a bit after it was about, people, I don't know, self-proclaimed experts or something that didn't work at all. So I knew, okay, change gears. The business stuff is not going to work, but I got the one joke. So you learn to think on your feet, because I've been doing it for a long time. I mean, I've been out of it. I've been in it. I've been out of it. Now, I mean, it just comes back to me. It's like riding a bike. I mean, I've been on stage. When you saw me, I wasn't on stage for a few months. I did a few open mics, which were a complete joke because it was different. It was like you go up in front of a bunch of comics and they're all the faces in their notebook and they're like, who's this old dude? And then, and I'm like, yeah, I said, it was funny. I said to this one guy, I said, listen, let me go do a guest set on one of your weekend shows. You have to do my open mics. I said, all right, well, dude, I'm doing City Winery. I'm doing Comedy Cabaret and Comedy Works to do 10-minute guest spots, but I'll do your open mic, dude. And I said, oh, by the way, the room you do your open mic in, I headlined 3 years ago. So I was like, get out of here. But you deal with it and you just sit there and you go, hey, it's a new man's game. I was gone for a long time. So
So you're working your way.
It's like anything, you grow. When you first took a picture, sure, it was a lot different. I mean, you have the idea, but you don't know the right lighting. You have the concept comedy. This is a joke. But then as you get older, you go, well, you know what? I don't want to do a joke. I want to talk. And that's what I've developed too. And I do occasionally slip into a joke because doing jokes are fun. Jokes are just a stupid joke is one, it's hard to write. And two, there's something good when you get the groan. You go, all right, it worked. But now a young comic would go, oh my God, wait, they don't like me. For me, I'm like, I'm gonna do this stupid joke because I do the one I go about. I got my proctologist from Groupon. I got 3 fingers for the price of 2. Groaner, and I know that now, but I know it's also a solid joke when you break it down.
Right. And how, like, so when you're doing like a 20-minute set, like how long does it take to write that set and how much do you prepare for it? And when you are doing that, like, do you put that joke in to say, I'm going to let this crowd groan for a minute. I know they're going to groan. It's going to be funny to me. And then I'm going to hit them. Like, do you play with that, like that swing of emotions?
Well, for me, it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day when I 10 years ago, when I was first dating Joanne, and I came back and do a set, I worked with a guy who was doing the exact same act he's doing in 91, to the point where he was still doing Reagan impressions. And I was like, Jesus Christ, what is wrong with you? I'm like, dude, no, for me, and I'll be completely honest, because I don't perform a lot, I always say I'm going to practice my act. I don't. I'll sit there, I'll do it, I'll go in the bedroom and say, okay, and I don't allow for laughs. And I look at my watch and I go, okay, that's fine. I take a notebook on stage because 1, I have a bad memory. 2, I have a bit where I talk about, things that bother me. I wrote it down. I said I write it down. And I tell a joke and I have a bad memory. I'm losing my memory as I get older. But for me, I'll be honest. 1, I'll go up on stage and I'll start getting laughs. And I'm in the moment and I'll forget the bit I'm going to do. But then something else will pop in my head. So I really don't plan anymore. There are people who go up and, like a Seinfeld, he's a master monologist. That's what Jerry does. I'm sure it's all written out. I know people who write it, they write their set list. And I write a set list. I don't really look at it, but then I'll sit there and I'll look and I'll go, oh, okay. And that's the thing about having the notes. I'll go, oh yeah, I can look. But then I'll go, oh, I should do that bit. But when you saw me, I knew I was going to open with the Lyft Uber joke. because that gets a strong laugh. But when I did Pizzeria Uno, when I do that Crohn's benefit, October 26th, Dave Evans, who was in the networking today, I know my opener already. So I go give it up for Dave Evans, the Jewish man with the most non-Jewish name ever. And I go, Dave Evans does not sound like a CPA from Cherry Hill. Dave Evans sounds like a restaurant manager from Mullica Hill. I know that will work. And then I go into I'll do another bit about him. And I'll go into the Crohn's and I'll go, I did this, I don't know. I thought Crohn's was like a pastry. I thought it was half croissant, half scone. Gets a laugh. Yeah. But I know that. But then once I get going, sometimes I'll sit there. Someone will say something, and I'll go into the crowd because I have fun doing that. But it's all planned before I go. Once I get on stage, it all goes to shit. I just go, oh, okay, this or this. So it's yeah, there are people who stick strictly to a set list. But for me, even when it was my career and comics go, you always write, you're always writing, because stuff would just pop in my head. And I said, because if I do it exactly my same set every night, that's sort of like having a real job. And aren't we creative, so we don't have to have a real job where a job's supposed to be fun? It's no fun sitting there going, yeah, hi, boom, 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 boom. It's like being a teacher. It's not, there's no room for improv. We're not dealing with a crowd. So I do prepare a set. I don't follow it though. I don't sit there, I go, but when I know I have to do 20, I always worry, I can't cover the time. That's why, like, one of my friends said, you should headline this room. I said, I can't cover the time. I can't do 45. They go, you've done it. I go, I don't want to, it's not, if it was my job, it'd be different. Right. I'm like, I don't want to practice it.
What are like I assume it's a very different mindset of like, I got 5 minutes, so I know I need to do this, and 20 minutes, and then 45. Like, how do you like get yourself into the headspace? Like, okay, like this is what I'm going to need to do in order to like really make that time period count.
Well, when you do 5, I always noticed this too. I remember I didn't get it. But I auditioned for MTV half-hour comedy hour at the comic strip in New York, and I tried to cram too much shit into 5 instead of being myself. So for now, it's like I sit there, and before I'd be like, I want to do this bit. Now, if I did 20 minutes, I'm like, okay, I have to get to this bit. This was years ago. Now I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go screw around, and I'm not going to worry about it. And I'm relaxed. And if I don't, like, as I said, I have the 10 things that irritate me. My last 2 shows, I got into 2 or 3 of them. The first time I did all of them because that was my first time on stage. And I took a big chance because I didn't, like, think it was 15. And that was like 8 minutes of my set. If that was eating it, I would have been killed. And then I changed it that time. I said, these are people who should be shot. But I took that out because it's sort of mean. But I go, these people that irritate me. And I know, but I don't get to them. So you're disappointed when you get off stage, but then you go, well, hell, I just did a bunch of other material. So you don't, once you let it get into your head, you're not gonna do as well. If you worry about the time, I put a little timer up and I go, oh crap, I'm at 15 minutes. What am I gonna do now? And you need a good closer. You need a close. But now it's like if they're laughing, you don't need a big closer. You're not the headliner. If the headliner is like, oh, or if the MC wants a big, because then it brings the energy up for the room. When you're in the feature, you're like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't. But you want to do something that will get a laugh. But yeah, I just, it's like anything. You just go up and you wing it, man. I mean, you don't wing it. You have material, but you can't, as you get older and you're doing it. And like me, when I go up, I just have fun now. I'm nervous as hell before, which I used to not be that nervous because I haven't been on stage. But once I'm up there, I just have fun. And I go, you know what? When the time's out. I'll look at it. I have a timer, and every act I've always worked with said I never go over my time. I always do the right time, even if I'm doing well. If I'm not doing well, I'll probably bail a minute or 2 early. But yeah, so it's every comic's different for me. I just go up. I go, you know what? I'm just gonna go with it. And someone might say something, and all of a sudden your mind goes, oh, and you go into a completely different tangent, and you remember a bit. Like if someone says what they do, or if someone says they're an Eagles fan, then you go, oh, I wrote a bit about the EAGLES Eagles. Oh, that's in the back of my mind. I would really never use it because just so you know, a lot of times when we look like we're going off the cuff, half the time we are, half the time we aren't. Sometimes people will respond to something where it's a bit you've written. If it's about like a car, Like, I used to think
Mhm.
it's stupid jokes. I'm like, what kind of car you drive? Oh, I go, yeah, you know what? And I used to go, you know what the favorite gynecologist's favorite car is? The Pro. Stupid joke, but it got a laugh because people thought it was. I was thinking of that.
Right.
That's the thing. But sometimes you'll go on a tangent. That's what's fun about it, and that's a sign of someone who's doing it for a while. I mean, Matt Reese just goes on tangents, and he's been doing it forever. I
Yeah.
mean, I've done it longer than him, but he's been in it forever.
Yeah. He stayed along. Like when you look, you were talking about like 88 and there was like it was like a swell of comedy. Like that kind of coincides with it. I remember my exposure to comedy, like growing up, was Comedy Central. Like when Comedy Central came out and short attention span theater, like as a kid or teenager, like I'm watching stand-up comedy, probably something that I would never have access to prior to that. Like that's it was meant for the clubs, and maybe you got an album or something like that. Did you see a change like when that started to be broadcast, like, and then styles change, and now you have like TikTok and those types of things? Are you seeing like that influence comedy, or are you just seeing it reverts back to the meat eventually?
It started getting saturated. It was as the clubs were opening, people were booking crappy acts. I remember a guy saying, "Hey, do you want to headline this?" I said, "I'm not a headliner." He goes, "Oh, well, and I go, "Well, if I do close, what are you gonna pay me?" I go, "Dude, I get paid that to feature." "Oh, then I'll bring this person in." People were just out to make money. And when
Mhm.
Comedy Central happened, a lot of clubs opened. But that was before. Comedy Central sort of killed comedy, to be honest, because, you know, before Comedy Central, Evening at the Improv was a big show on A&E,
Mhm.
and Comedy on the Road was on A&E, and Caroline's. They had these shows, and people would do 8-minute sets. But then Comedy Central came in, and comedy was always around your face. So it's like, well, wait. And they started showing comedy specials. And I said, well, why am I going to go to the club
Right.
and pay $20 and have to have a 2-drink minimum, then I can get a 6-pack and hang out with my friends and watch it. So I think it started bringing it down a little bit. The acts, it's like anything. I know acts who were on those shows who sucked, but they had a great 8 minutes. There's some people, the funny thing, like they always say about Chris Rock, Chris Rock was struggling, man. He was an okay comic. And then Eddie Murphy walked into the comic strip and said, why isn't there any black guys up here? Chris Rock was like one of the only brothers hanging out in New York. And he usually struggled, but that night he went up and he destroyed.
Oh
And then
wow.
off that night, he got cast in Beverly Hills Cop 2. And so it was some people, then of course, Chris is an amazing actor and he's developed and, he was really, but he really focused on stand up. He left In Living Color to focus on stand up. And he was just, he's a great actor. He wasn't afraid. He had no fear.
Mhm.
But a lot of action was like anything. Look how many MBAs there are, and how many actually have cush jobs. It's like with comics, there was a ton of comics, but then when the clubs started closing, because people get tired of it.
Right.
I mean, look, in South Jersey, there's not even a full-time comedy club, which there used to be 3. There was Mitchell's in Palmyra, which was amazing, Comedy Cabaret in Cherry Hill, and the one in Mount Laurel, the Comedy Cabaret in Mount Laurel, and they all got packed. Now no venues want to do it because you don't know if they're going to make money or not.
Wow. Yeah, I remember like there was I remember going to the Laugh House on South Street, which then closed, and then it seemed like a while before Helium opened up.
I
Like
think
even
I
Philly.
was gone. I was going to Laugh House was originally the Funny Bone, and that
Okay.
changed. By then, originally Comedy Factory Outlet, the Comedy Works, and then Going Bananas was down near South Street, and then Bananas closed, and all of a sudden the outlet disappeared, and the Comedy Works was above the Middle East restaurant on Second and Chestnut.
Mhm.
It's Third and Chestnut, and they got great acts. Leno and all these people used to come in there. Comedy Factory Outlet got great acts. Tim Allen, all these people, Dom Herrera. But then just people lost. They didn't want to go see comedy anymore. I guess it's like
Yeah.
anything. Karaoke was huge, disappeared. Disco was huge, disappeared. Then it starts coming back. So it's you never know what's going to happen.
So when you went out to LA, like, did you go out to like be a comic, or were you gonna? Because you've done like acting, you did like the sketch comp. Like, what did you like say? All right, this is where I'm going to take this career now.
I don't even know. I'll be honest. I moved out there. Me and my ex-wife moved to Vegas for a year, San Diego. She thought I wanted to write. And then we split and I went to LA. And I just screwed around a lot too. I mean, I optioned the screenplay and never sold. I had a play that ran and then I had a sketch comedy troupe. I'd audition. I was in a really, 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 really bad movie. I was in like in 20 minutes of it, 25 minutes. It's called Killer Drag Queens on Dope. And it had Alexis Arquette, and it had Freddie Boom Boom Washington, the guy who played him. And I played I was Tony and Anthony. We were two like henchmen. And it was things I was sort of lost in LA, I'll be honest. And I was doing some freelance writing, and I got into restaurant marketing. And I would do stand up occasionally. People like, oh, you're really funny, but I never really wasn't into it. I was sort of a lost soul in LA. That will do it to you at times. You know, you sit there and you get it's such a grind, and you know, and even actors I know who I've interviewed who work, you know, they're still auditioning. You know, it's like LA is a scary scene. There's an old story about Shelley. I mean, what's her name? No, Shelley Winters. Shelley Winters. Okay, she has, you know, she's won 2 Oscars.
Right.
So she's gonna. They want her to do this part, and they ask her. She has to. They tell her she has to come in audition, and people are like, she's like, what? Huh? So she walks in, and she has 2 bowling ball bags, and in them are her Oscars. She puts them on the table and goes, "There's my fucking audition." She walks out. But that's the thing, you know. Max van Sydow has won an Oscar, and my friend Mark Valadez, my neighbor, and writes for TV shows. And he wrote for a Queen of the South and a few other things. And he was like he was in the writers' room one time, and they're like, they see him in the lobby, and they're like, wait, how is this guy auditioning? Like, it's Max van Sydow. So that's how you get lost in LA. So that's you know, I was sort of lost, and I just, you know, I eke by. I did background, I did hand modeling. I was on the Ellen Show twice. You know, my lazy eye hurt me with some of the commercials. You know, my buddy directed commercials. He goes, "You nailed the script, but your eye, you know, it's not." You know, my lazy eye got worse as I got older. But so yeah, it was one of those things. You know, LA is just weird, but you know, you meet a lot of people, and then I started the podcast there, so I know so many actors and musicians from that. And that was just, you know, I fell into the Cooper Talk because I was doing corporate restaurant marketing, and I was at a Chamber of Commerce event, and these girls I knew were talking to this guy who had an internet radio station. And they said, Cooper, it'd be great to have a show. And he goes, oh, yeah, you want to do a show? I go, all right. So I went and I said, yeah, I want to do an hour interview. Yeah, you can't do an hour interview show. I go, why? He goes, because we're indie rock. It's called indie100.com. Still on. My show's still on. And he said, do half music, indie music, and half interview. I bring in different acts. I had like Paul Top. Well, Paul came in when it was over an hour. But I would do it. And then finally, I was getting like, he's one time he calls me, he goes, dude, you got like 35, 40,000 listeners. He goes, dude, do an hour of talk. So that's when I started doing that. But that was learning because I had never done that. I'd done
yeah, I was gonna it's funny that you went there because that's exactly where I was gonna go to next, because you were early in the podcast world. Like you've been
I wasn't
doing it
even
for
a podcast to start. I was an internet
it
radio.
was internet radio, yeah.
I mean, Maron was on an early one of my episodes. I don't have the tape of it. You know, it was so I yeah, I just started doing it. And what happened was I was getting different acts I knew, comics that I met at the club out there. And I booked a show at this comedy club called Cooper's Angels, where I'd hosted. It'd be all female comics. So I have the person who's going to headline. And I just really, I had never done it. I'd done some radio, like when you're on the road, you would call into stations. And I just had to figure out how to cut. It had to be an hour. So if your guests sucked, you had to do it an hour. And I learned very quickly, and I told comedians who came in, you can't do bits. You can't do a comedy bit. The show's not about, I didn't want a comedy show. So I just started doing it. I remember my first sort of big guest was Kato Kaelin, the OJ trial.
Yeah,
and then
I remember him.
Kato came in, and then I got Robbie Benson, who's a big 70s star. And then I just started sitting there going, you know what? I don't want to just interview local comics. So I started sending messages on LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, on Facebook, or I tweet at them, like different actors. Hey, I saw you. Want to come to the show? People started coming into the studio. I remember I was walking home. I got onion rings from this place. I came from a happy hour, and Joanne, my wife now, was making chili. So I said, I was a little buzzed. I'm going to get some onion rings. I'm late. Oh, yeah. And there's this guy that looks familiar. His name's Eric Palladino. He's been in a bunch of stuff. Like, oh, you an actor? He goes, yeah, yeah. And he's with his kids. That's how I told him. I got his show. He goes, I go, yeah, David Marciano. I said, oh, I know him. Yeah, come on, do it. And it just started going like that. And then I was like, okay, I can get a lot of actors. And I was getting TV writers, and people liked me. So I would get other people. They go, hey, has this guy been on your show? And I was getting names. I was like, when Ed Asner's in the studio, I'm like, Ed Asner. Shit, it's Ed Asner. and his pants were pulled up to his waist, walks in with his
Yeah.
cane. And he looked at me when we took the picture. He goes, take that smug fucking smile off your face, joking around. But he was like, I'll come back. He was great. And then I never really had musicians on, but I was at a bar and I met this guy, Troy Patrick Farrell, who was hanging out with John Corabi, who later went on to sing with Motley Crue. But Troy played for White Lion. So Troy came in, and then so I got him. So I had musicians. Then I met Rich Redmond, plays for Aldine at a party. And now all of a sudden I got like Liberty DeVito from Billy Joel calling me, or Carmine at Peace. People calling me, yeah, Cooper, I heard we got to do your show. And that's when I was out of the studio because the studio closed. I was doing it for Skype, but just audio. And so
Mhm.
yeah, but I learned from just doing it, and it's like comedy. And I believe this about comedy. I believe this about networking. I believe this about interviewing people. You're either good at it or you're not. You're either funny or you're not. You can go to a comedy class and they can tell you where to go. You're funny or you're not, and that's the bottom line. It's like you can play sports or you can't. You do photography. You either have a good eye or you don't. I can take what might look a good picture. I took one when we were in the Dominican Republic. My wife said, "That looks like a professional picture." Yeah, that's one out of 800. Like when I take pictures of my food, it takes me like 6 times. That doesn't look better. Or there's too much smoke. There's too much steam coming off it. But that's the thing. And that's what, like with interviewing, people, you either can interview or you can't. And when you interview, I'm someone who uses this style. I don't write any questions out. I just go with it. I interviewed a guy from the Dandy Warhols yesterday. I really don't know anything about the music. And we ended up having a great conversation. I don't even know where we talked about the music. It's like George Lynch, the guitar monster. He went on and he just started messing with me. So we just bantered back and forth. And like we didn't, and finally I said, George, can we talk about your new album? Because but I was feeding off him. And that's the thing. I know a lot of podcast guys who they do so much research because they want to be so hip. They want to
Mhm.
ask this question that no one has ever asked. And then sometimes people are like, man, once again, when I said comedy, oh, they're when the people go, oh, they didn't talk. Well, these guys go, oh, they go, I love when they go to me, you did a lot of research. I said, that's funny. I like when they say to me, that's a great question. And that's the thing. So it's like anything. I think so many of us are just, you're good at stuff or you aren't. And people have to get over that. I mean, we run into it. I mean, I'm sure you meet people who I know you gave a photography class. There's going to be people, unfortunately, there's going to be people that suck. And you don't want to tell them they suck. But in the long run, you let them do it. And some people who suck get a break. Actors happens all the time. But yeah, so it's like with the podcasting, you can interview or you can't. I've learned to interview. You let them talk. People don't listen to my show to hear me. They hear Tom Arnold was on. I said, Tom, tell me 3 good stories. I was dying. He was telling me stories. I asked them one. I said, I heard you got thrown out of this political event in Philly. And he starts his story because he was going to protest General Flynn and they wouldn't let him in. He got thrown out. And then he went into the whole thing where he said, he tweeted, I can't believe Donald Trump's in the WWF Hall of Fame. I tell you, I can body slam him. And he gets a knock from the Secret Service at his door. And they go, Tom, we know you're not going to do it.
Right, but we have to follow
One of your
along.
fans might. But now, that's a lot more interesting to me going, hey, so today I was eating, I was drinking coffee and eating a croissant. No, that's what people don't get. Like a lot of these, I see back to the podcast, how we started out the interview, there's a lot of these podcasts popping up doing the, you guys are at episode 14, but you're doing it. There's a lot of people who do it and they sit there and go, well, this isn't as easy as we think. And they just don't enjoy it. They think, oh, people are going to notice me. I see some of these podcasts on LinkedIn. I go, I guarantee this is a steaming pile of crap. I just know it because I know this person and they're nice, but they're just, they're just not engaging. And that's like
Yeah.
with the Coop Tank. I need engaging people. You did a great job. You guys were in the first episode. And even
Yeah.
since then, I've gotten better because I changed it a little bit. But I know that there are people who are good. And there are people I know, like one guy I'm friends with, but he's entertaining, but I would never have him on my show because he doesn't shut up. And for my show, you said, you have to shut
Yeah.
up. It's a cycle. And people are really enjoying that because I have the questions and I do write out questions before, then I'll go off thing. But in all honesty, it's a business podcast. Almost every question is going to be the same. You just
Mhm.
change the words instead of saying, so
Yeah,
John, how'd you get photography? So photography, what is it that brought you to that? And then people, oh, it's a different question. It's the exact same question, but just different.
that's fantastic. And then, so what made you decide to do, so you kind of fell into Cooper Talk and then it became a thing. And then what made you decide to do the business roundtable one, the Coop Tank? Because that one, that is, it's such a unique niche because it is hyper local. But you get a lot of business eyes on it. So what made you decide to go in that route?
Well, I wanted to do something different. I love interviewing celebrities. I love it, but I want to do something more to build my brand around here. So I met Joe Cangemi from Sweet Recording, which that time was called Towncast Studios. And I said, let me come
Mhm.
in. I'll what you think. Let's do this. I want to do the Coop Tank. I had the idea. I got the logo. Once again, I never set date, but I got the logo made. So that meant I had to do it. I'm just going to sit there with the logo.
Right.
So I started by talking to business people about how they got where they are. And luckily, I'm friends with Tony Luke Jr. I'm friends with Joe Conklin. Joe created a brand. Tony created a band. Rich Redmond, all this Dave Raymond, the original Philly fanatic.
Hmm.
Then I had local people like Jim Turpin, who's my financial, Jim, because
Yeah.
I know he has a great story. I was getting people who had a great story. And TJ from Life Brand. And I was doing this, and I'm like, you know what? I go, there's all these other people interviewing business people. It's always, I said, I want to do something different. And I don't know how it came to me, but I said, maybe I was watching like Around the Horn or something, or my wife watches a lot of MSNBC and they have panels. I said, why don't I just do something? Why don't I just give it a try?
Hmm.
I said to Joe, I said, I don't want it in studio because for him, production wise, that would suck. I said, I just want to do it like this. And I just decided to start doing it. And I went in, and the first time with you guys, I think I had you, you were in the first episode. I think it was you, the Duke, and I forget. And
And Kirsten.
who?
Kirsten?
Okay. And I went in and I had you guys say what you did. And then now I changed that. Say, how you doing? They go, hi, thanks for having me. And I get that. And then I go, tell us about you. And I just started. And I did it because one, what I find people are liking about it is I bring in people that I respect, that I like. And I know people that it sounds awful. I know they'll look good on screen. You don't want to see, I mean, it's people are watching this for they can listen to it, but I get a lot more views than
Yeah.
listens. And I know that they're not full of crap. And I know that they're not showboats. I will never have a showboat on. I had one person who I thought might be a showboat, and I took a chance, and they weren't. They were a really good guest. I just thought this guy might be like, oh, because I've seen his social media, but he was a good guest. And the funny thing is, because he had a lot of respect for me, because he's like
Yeah.
he always calls me Howard Stern when he sees me. So I went up, but I just said, you know what? What people enjoy about it is people are opening up. People are telling stories. People are sitting there going, I'm not. It's not like when you go, so how'd you get your start? I'll ask that. What got you? Because a lot of people have changed their their jobs. But people are honest, and I think they want to be honest because we go into like breakout rooms, we go to networking events, and people are full of it. And I say, listen, I go, if you curse, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Just just talk, and it's fine. And you'd be surprised. You get into I always my one segment I always do in the one segment, which actually you used to always talk about this in different rooms. I ask people what book they're reading or a business book or what makes them because I don't read any of that. But if the listeners and the viewers sit there and go, well, that sounds like a good book, they're going to go
Hmm.
look at it. They're getting something out of it. Then I go into the whole thing. What bothers you about LinkedIn? I always have a keyword that bothers me. I know you were on it was rock star and
Yeah.
ninja. I know that always irks you. But the thing is, it's funny. People open up. Oh, I hate influencer. I hate this. And where some people have said, a few people, Anna Marie Crusoe was a great guest. She's like, she was afraid to do that kind of stuff. And I met her at the network. She came on, she was great. And she was like, thank
Hmm.
you. And some people were like, I've never done a podcast before. Thank you. And I said, I'm not going to, I said, if the worst thing is, if you're not good, there's two other people. You don't have to worry.
Right. You
One
can
woman
kind
I
of
want to get
hide.
on. Yeah, there's one woman I want to get on. And she's like, I'm not, I don't like doing podcasts. I know she'd be great. I know her friends. She's friends with a bunch of my guests. And I sent her an email again, and she's like, I don't know. I said, well, just watch it because that's the thing. I don't consider this a podcast. I consider it a roundtable, like you said. It's
Hmm.
not a one-on-one. That's how it started out. And then after about 30 episodes or 35, I just said, I gotta switch this. And I think I'm on episode 17 of the round table, which is pretty cool because that's 51 business people coming in and all different. And for some reason, I think once again, it's just the luck, or it's just I have an inert, is that the word? Inert skill.
Inherent.
I book great panels. I booked Ashley Dunnick, Greg Santor, who no one really knows in networking, but I know him from high school. He's like best friend was Robin Leach, very interesting guy, and Travis Cooney, who's a lawyer. Nothing in common. I just haven't put them in. Then I find out they all went for secondary education, like they have degrees. They all played college sports. So I was like, wow. And then like this tomorrow, I'm recording. I have an all-woman panel, and they're over 45. So when I attack that, you can really attack stuff where has it changed so much? Is it still a guy's world? So I think I want to do topics that people go, wow, I learned something. You know, wow, okay, this person's a successful lawyer, but they didn't know what they were doing. Or like Lloyd Birnbaum left his big firm because he missed out on his kids. He goes, I started this firm. I never thought it would grow as much as it is now. But it's everyone gets a lesson. And I always end it with, what would you tell a young person, you know, coming out of trade school, high school, whatever? What would you tell them if they're going to business world, getting a start? And a lot of people mention mentors, a lot of people, you know, and it always sits there. I listen to it. It fascinates me. And it's just funny to see people who are nervous in the beginning starting, and then after, because it goes like 45 minutes to 55 minutes. After about 20 minutes, they start getting into gear, you know, and then you're like, all right, then they're focusing, and then they're feeding off the other people. And I always say you can, you know, when someone's done, you can add, but a lot of them don't, because they make their statement. So that, and I love it. I like the show, and it's something that it's fun for me, and it's challenging because I had never done a round table like that, and now I'm learning, and it's I learn. I go in every time with an open mind, and I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna have fun today, even if I feel like crap. I said I felt like crap last week. I was fighting a cold after I got back from the Dominican. I was fighting sort of a stomach flu, and I said, but I gotta get there, and I gotta do this. And once you get into the moment, you forget about that.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Where can people find everything you're working on? So I want to hit the podcast and any upcoming shows you have.
Okay, well, you can go to YouTube, search The Coop Tank. Go to The Coop Tank, and go, even if you don't watch it, subscribe to it, like it, comment. The podcast version of The Coop Tank, I have to get on. I'm not on iTunes. I have to get on. You can find it at Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google. Look The Coop Tank, or you want to go to thecooptank.podbean.com. You can find that there. My show, Cooper Talk, go to coopertalk.net. I've done 975 episodes.
Wow.
I've had 30 members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, 4 members of the E Street Band, 80s music icons, Oscar winners, Emmy winners. I've had the guys who created Everyone Loves Raymond, the guy who created the 70s show, the guy who created The Shield, a bunch of TV writers, which are always great interviews. That's coopertalk.net. And I'm on, if you want to follow me on Facebook, you can go to Cooper Talk Radio, put a like on there, or I'm on LinkedIn. Look up Steve Cooper.
All right, sounds good. And you have any comedy shows coming up?
October 26th at PJ Wheelahands. It's a Crohn's fundraiser. I look up Dave Evans for that. He has that information. And you can always email me at thecooptank@yahoo.com. And if you want to advertise on the Coop Tank, hit me up there too.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This is great. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.